Okay, so I don't know why CAR makes it so difficult to get to where we want to go. But when you log into CAR, you're gonna press here, access transactions. I'm gonna press on transactions, and then I'm gonna have to press transactions again. So down here, the first box says transactions. I'm gonna press access now. Validating my membership. And I'm going to press down here, continue to transaction. So following the yellow brick road to transaction. Okay.
Can you?
Again?
Yeah, sure. Please. Thank you.
Sure. So again, we're going to go to car.org.
Yeah.
And we're going to log in. When you log in, you're going to be on this page.
Just log in. Okay, I got you. I got you.
There we go.
Secure transaction down.
We have to be member.
You have to be a member. You have to be a member of the board to get access to the contract.
So we're going to Lone Wolf.
Lone Wolf Technologies owns zip forms.
That's great. But
yes.
So down a little more.
Yeah. So we're going to click transactions. And that's going to take us to Lone Wolf Transactions Zip Form Edition. Yeah. Access now.
Where we have to be member?
So you have to be a member of the Greater Los Angeles Association of Realtors. It's GLAR. GLAR. Yeah, you can join them through our office. They'll help you. Sophia will help you with that. Sophia is our agent services director. She sits right here on the other side of this wall. Yeah, she'll help you with that. You join EH. It used to be Beverly Hills, Greater Los Angeles. They dropped Beverly Hills for some reason. It's GLAR, Greater Los Angeles Association of Realtors. When you join the local board, you're automatically a member of California Association of Realtors and National Association of Realtors. You can't join just National Association of California. You have to join a local board. When you join local, you're automatically state.
We can do this before we get our license.
You have to have a license first.
I'll ask you.
After. Yeah.
I see an advertisement for a live webinar.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of education from CAR for sure.
Okay,
for sure.
I don't see it on anybody else's.
Right. But today, I'm your live education.
So then we go to transactions.
Then we go to transactions access now. And that'll take us into zip forms, which they're validating, they're handing us over. I don't know. Continue to transactions. And this takes us to our dashboard. And then our dashboard. All right, so you're gonna create an offer, you're gonna write an offer, you're basically gonna hit this new button, you're gonna create a new transaction. So you're gonna hit new, you're gonna say new purchase offer, like that. And then what property are you writing an offer on? So you'll name the property, whatever it is. So I'm writing an offer on 1, 2, 3, 4 Palm Drive. And then there's a button here called MLS Connect. If you know the MLS number for 1, 2, 3, 4 Palm Drive, you can hit MLS Connect and you can type the MLS ID right here and press find, and it'll populate all the properties information. Pretty cool.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Car.com is part of this.
CAR.org is California Association of Realtors.
Is it part of this when we are member?
Yes.
Then we have access to car also.
Yes. So you're going to join GLAR, and then they're going to assign you a realtor ID, and then once you have access to that, you'll be able to register at CAR. So when you for the first time, the very first time that you go to car.org, it's going to say register, and then you're going to put your ID number that was given to you from the Greater Los Angeles Association of Realtors, and then you'll create a password, and then you'll have access. Yeah. Okay, so transaction information. Now you can do this. You can say it's a residential property, active and save. and it'll create, it'll create a new transaction. And then the place to then go is documents right here. And we can start adding documents. You can add a doc here, add a doc here. And then the forms are over here on the right where it says all forms. We can click that and that'll take you to the form libraries. Now, if you look at the form libraries, it says California Association of Realtors. There are other form libraries here. So there's something called EPUBs, which are the electronic publications. Let's just look at that real quick. This is the residential, there's a residential environmental hazard book, protect your family from a lead. There's different government required disclosures here. There's also commercial disclosures. So it's a small library, but there are government required disclosures there. Now this is California Association of Realtors. That's the one that we're accessing. The very first option we have is California Residential Purchase Agreement. That's the offer right there. That's the one we want. So I'm going to back out of here and just go to my, I've already created a transaction. All contracts, let's see. Purchase agreement. Contract class. So I've already created something here and I added documents to it. So I have here California Residential Purchase Agreement. So we're going to look at that. When you are starting to edit a document, when you click on any document that you add, so if you add a document from here, you double click it, it's going to appear here. When you click on it to edit it, it's going to give you two options. You can use the classic editor or the new form editor.
Can you use the new one? Because they got
I'm going to use the new one.
Right?
I'm going to use the new one. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So the new form editor. So here is the residential purchase agreement. Want everyone to see it. You can minimize that whole thing.
Why should we edit it?
So edit it meaning you can type in the buyer's name, your name. That's what it fill out. Yes, fill out, not edit. Thank you. So we're gonna fill out the offer now. Okay, the first document that we're presented with is called an agency disclosure. Disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships. By law, we have to have this signed by any buyer or seller before they sign any document with us. Okay, that's the law. So we have to tell them what an agent is. People just don't know. Like there are real estate agents. So what is an agent? So there's agents that represent sellers. There's agents that represent buyers. And an agent can represent both a buyer and a seller. In this context, we're talking about the broker, okay? So what are your obligations as a seller's agent, a buyer's agent, or when you represent both parties? So for a seller, your obligation to everybody is fair and honest dealing. You have to be fair, you have to be honest. Your obligation to a seller, though, is to get them the most money. You have to get a seller the most money. Your obligation to a buyer is full disclosure. You have to tell a buyer anything you know that could change their mind about buying a property or affect the amount they're willing to pay for it. Okay, that's the litmus test for disclosure. Any material fact, someone has passed away on a property, someone's been killed on a property, anything that you know that's damage to the property. Now, this is now I'm just talking about disclosures. I mean, a seller has to disclose what they know about a property. An agent has to give a visual disclosure of what they see, but the seller is responsible for disclosing. But right now we're talking about an agent's responsibility. An agent's responsibility to a buyer is full disclosure. What you know, you have to say. So that's it. So basically, we're going to check the buyer box and we're going to put the name of our buyer here. So this is one of the things you're going to need from your buyer is their legal name. who the offer is coming from. If they're writing an offer with a partner, then you need to get the partner's name as buyer two, and they'll check box for buyer two. Okay. Sometimes they will want you to add and or assignee. You can do it. I don't, I'm not going to tell you not to do that. You can do and or assignee. More to be said about it.
That helps with the deal going through.
So if someone wants me to add and or assignee to their purchase agreement, I'm going to ask them why. Hopefully their response is because I might want to put it into an LLC, or I'm not sure how I want to take title yet. But I'm just, my red flag might go up that they're trying to buy it and then flip it to assign the contract to someone else.
But it's legal if they want to do it.
It's legal. So we were talking about it briefly. We'll come back to it. It is legal, but the seller is going to get upset.
For sure.
So the seller is going to be upset because all of a sudden the property is being sold for more than they're in contract for. And they're being disclosed that someone's making money on them. The person who's assigning the contract is making profit.
For sure.
So the seller feels gypped, right?
The way I was saying it was that, say I have a house that's, needs to be torn down pretty much and rebuilt. Say I go to a contractor or whatever, tell them I have this out, you call it pocket listing, because it's not on MLS or anything. And then you get like a finder's fee from that person. Is that ethical? I mean, you're still getting the buyer, the seller, the most that you can get, because it's still,
So let's just, if you make an offer to, if a seller accepts an offer in general, they accept an offer, and then they want to assign the contract to someone else. The person who is the buyer under contract, the buyer has a contract with the seller. If the buyer wants to sell the property, they have to close escrow first and then they can sell it. Or they can assign their contract to a new buyer and get paid for their contract. If they do that, then they need to use an assignment form. Assignment of agreement addendum. The assignment of agreement addendum has to be signed by the seller of the property. Okay, here's what the assignment of agreement addendum looks like. It has an agency. This is the purchase agreement. Assignment of agreement addendum. Okay. The following terms and conditions are hereby incorporated and made part of the purchase agreement. Here's total assignment, new buyer, replaces all original buyer. Here's the assignee name, the new buyer's name. Buyer has received or will receive consideration from assignee in the amount of. This is usually going to be $100,000 or something.
Why? Why that much?
The buyer who has the property under contract is now selling their contract to another buyer for a profit.
Okay.
That has to be disclosed here to the seller. The seller has to sign and agree to this.
Oh, the assignment. Yeah.
Now the seller is going to be like, you just stole $100,000 from me. I could have sold my house for $100,000 more.
Get it. All right.
Right? The seller's pissed.
Nobody's-
It's under contract for this much. And all of a sudden, someone for doing absolutely nothing except getting their property under contract is now selling the contract for $100,000 profit.
but they're gonna fix it up.
Yeah.
Well, that's different.
That's what I'm saying.
That's different. Okay, now, if you're buying a property and you're fixing it and making a profit, that's totally cool.
Yeah.
No problem.
So-
But if you're taking a property, getting it under contract,
yeah.
immediately selling it for a profit, the seller's going to be upset.
No, but
So-
if you're a contractor and I say I have this house, you can say,
Right. No problem there. No problem there.
Okay.
But there are people right now who are advertising cash paid for houses. And what they do is they lock up a property with a contract and they immediately try to find a buyer for the contract.
right,
That's what a lot of that is happening right
right. But if this person puts
And that's illegal.
300,000,
Shady. It's shady.
if they put 300,000 into it, and I say I want 50,000.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally fine. Yeah.
Hey, JJ, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you go back to where the buyer and the seller on the disclosure signs? I just have one question.
Which document?
Well,
This document?
no disclosure at the bottom,
So are we talking about the purchase agreement or the assignment?
the disclosure part of the purchase agreement.
Okay, so the agency disclosure.
Yeah,
Okay. So this is the first part of the purchase agreement,
it's at the bottom.
is agency. This is the agency disclosure.
Okay, it's at the bottom where,
At the bottom.
where my question, right here where it says like, Keller Williams, have the license number, the
Right.
company name,
Yes.
and then does my name go there?
Yeah, so this is a template that I share with you in my shared folder.
Okay.
And you're gonna type the name of the buyer in the parentheses where, instead of the parentheses, you're gonna put the name of the buyer. You're gonna actually type Keller Williams Beverly Hills there.
Okay,
This is our brokerage's DRE number.
okay,
And then you're gonna put your name
there,
and your DRE number there.
because I was kind of,
Yeah, this is
I
the
need to
template.
put the broker's name there or my
Broker,
name.
the brokers, it says real estate broker. So the firm. That's what goes here.
Okay, so,
I know it says agent. That's why it's confusing. It says agent.
so Michael Rosales' name does not go on the.
Michael Rosales doesn't go anywhere on here at all.
Okay,
You'll never see his name anywhere here.
okay. Yeah, that was.
Keller Williams Beverly Hills is the brokerage. The reason it's confusing is because it says agent,
Okay. 'cause
but the agent is the
I went
broker.
on,
Remember before I was saying that here it's saying that seller's agent, buyer's agent, and then I said
Yeah.
that this is actually talking about brokers
Yeah.
because down here is same thing. Agent is.
My name and my ID.
Agency.
Yeah, you will be at the bottom as the salesperson.
Salesperson, yeah.
That's the agency.
It's because that's a lawyers get involved.
What is it?
That's a whole different conversation. So they're calling the broker the agent. Yeah, basically. They're calling the broker the agent. But then there's a salesperson.
That person is us.
That's us. We're the salesperson for the brokerage.
I didn't know if Michael Rosales' name went there or my name.
Yeah, your name, for sure, your name.
I typed in his last name, so I just take it out when I was practicing.
Okay, yeah, it's good. Okay, page 2, the civil code. I don't know why the civil code is attached to this, but the civil code just says you need to give an agency disclosure first to a buyer or seller, and this is what it needs to look like. It has to have the seller's brokerage, the seller's agent. So it just says what the document here needs to consist of. So I don't know why they include it, but they include it. All right, fair housing and discrimination advisory. Obviously, we are not allowed to discriminate against any of these things. You can only discriminate against money. If someone doesn't have enough money to buy a property, they don't get the property, but no other reason. So everyone signs that. Your buyer is going to sign this because the seller's not going to sign it yet. We're presenting the offer right now. Only the buyer and you are going to sign it right now. Possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. This is a very important document because it protects you from any situation because it's being disclosed up front. So it's saying that there are multiple buyers in the market. So our broker and you can represent multiple buyers. Our broker and you can represent multiple sellers. Dual agency occurs when the listing agent writes an offer on their own property. And it occurs when a sales associate in this office writes an offer for another agent in this office's property. That's dual agency because we're talking about the broker. Okay, so if one of the agents in this office has a listing and another agent in the office writes an offer on it, it's a dual agency. Now, this is a very important clause that's at the bottom here. It says offers not necessarily confidential. This means that an agent is allowed to talk about any term in an offer to anybody they want to. They can. So if I'm a listing agent and you walk into my open house and you say, JJ, do you have any offers? I can tell you how many I have, who they're from, how much they're for, and every single term about the offer. I can do that. Now, I'm not going to do that because it's not a good negotiation strategy. Or it might be, or it might not be. But probably for negotiation. If they ask, my response is, I know the seller will take at least asking. I have very strong.
We don't have to explain.
You don't have to. You don't have to. But if you do, you're not going to get in trouble. You have complete leniency on what you want to do. So I tell sellers that I use this as part of my listing presentation when I'm talking to a seller, and I say, I have strategy when it comes to how it's very important the agent that you pick, how they're talking to other agents. Very important. As a listing agent, people will call me all the time or come ask me, how much will it take to get this property? Expecting to hear a number from me lower than the asking price.
Right.
I will never tell a buyer or an agent less than your asking price. Right? I'm telling the seller that. Like, I'm not going to do that to you. Right?
Take at least that.
I will encourage you to write an offer, and then I'll present it to the seller. The seller wants to feel empowered, right? The seller is the only one that can ultimately make the decision anyway, right? The seller is the one accepting. I'm not accepting the offer, but I encourage everyone to write an offer. I'll present it to the seller. All right, so this buyer signs that, you sign that. Okay, wire fraud is very, I used to think wire fraud, that's so rare. That could never happen, like wire fraud. But here's what happens. Hackers will infiltrate
The escrow.
escrow's email. So hackers will get access to the email from escrow. So what will happen is escrow is always talking to buyers and sellers. A hacker can monitor the email and see an email comes into escrow from an agent. Congratulations, I'm opening an escrow. Here's my buyer's information. And then the hacker will send an email from the escrow's email to the agent and buyer. Wow. Congratulations, here are the wire instructions for your deposit. And it'll be their bank account.
Yeah.
Right?
So you need
so you need to tell your buyer before they wire any money, call the escrow company. Here's the number, I'm giving it to you. Call this number and verify the account number and the SWIFT code or the routing number.
Is there anything that we can do on computer so the hacker cannot do that? No.
Firewalls and stuff.
I mean,
Common sense.
yeah, you just have to be smart. You have to be smart about who you're giving your information to. Anytime you click something, if you put your mouse over the URL that you're clicking on, sometimes it'll pop up where it actually goes. So like if I get an email from PayPal or a bank and it says click here, I usually will never click a link in an email to go to a bank or something. I'll go directly to the bank and say like chase.com or wellsfargo.com. I'll never click the link to get to the bank. You just gotta be careful. I mean, they're getting so sophisticated. Okay, so wire fraud is real. It is very real. We have to alert our buyers before you wire money, confirm the account number over the phone. Okay, here's the purchase agreement. So here we go. Today's date. If I double click this, it'll automatically put today's date. So I'm just putting there today's date on the template. The name of the buyers. Again, it sounds silly, but you need to ask the buyer, who's the offer coming from? How should your name appear on the offer? It could be from them, it could be from an LLC, it could be from them and their parent or their significant other. And then you're going to put the property address, the city, the county, the zip code. The parcel number you're going to get from public records. It's also on the MLS. Okay, the parcel number is how they get taxed from the assessor's office. Okay, Keller Williams is the buyer's brokerage firm because we're writing an offer. We don't know who the seller's broker is until we look at the MLS or we talk to them already. So we're looking at the bottom of the MLS sheet and getting that information. If we use that MLS Connect link, it should automatically fill in, but we want to verify this If you look on the MLS at the property, at the very bottom, it will tell you who the broker is and who the agent is, and then they represent the seller. If it's Keller Williams Beverly Hills for both, you're gonna check both, and it automatically switches everything to dual agent. Okay. All right. Sometimes you're gonna have a situation where the property is co-listed. More than one brokerage represents the seller, right? Or you're co-representing a buyer, that's more rare. But if you click this box, it'll pull up a new form called additional broker acknowledgement. Okay, just so you know that. If there's more than one broker involved, you'll check the box.
Can you add the agent, one agent later when you are in escrow?
You can.
You need like another.
Yeah, it'll be the same document and everyone will sign it.
In what situation would you have more than one broker?
So a co-listing.
Yeah.
So let's say there's a $20 million listing and the seller is having a hard time deciding between two brokers and neither broker wants to lose the listing. They go to each other and say, hey, let's co-broker this, right?
And then
Also for the
I don't
buyers.
recommend co-brokering to anybody. I don't recommend co-listing to anybody because it's just a recipe for disaster, but it's better, something's better than nothing sometimes, right? So there's usually, it's like a relationship, right? Someone's the boss, someone's not.
But even
Or they
for the
both want to be the
buyer,
boss.
right?
Huh?
As the buyer, two buyers.
I guess, I mean, more than one, this is talking about more than one brokerage though. So that means that you and then someone in a different broker
Exactly.
are representing the same buyer. It's very rare. That's why I said it's rare.
So the broker of the company would have to sign off on that too, right?
Our broker has to sign off on everything, but this is an offer now. It's between the buyer and seller, not between the broker. So a listing is between the broker and the seller. So the broker has veto power on that. This is between the buyer and seller.
Okay, so the buyer.
The broker can't really do
both have
anything.
to
about
sign
it.
off on it, both buyer and seller, right?
The broker's not going to sign off between the buyer and
The
seller.
buyer and the seller.
Broker really has nothing to do with it except being representing them.
Now, I'm talking about the buyer and the seller, would they both have to agree on different brokerages?
So the seller is agreeing in the listing agreement to listing with two different brokerages at the same time.
Okay, so what does the buyer have a role in that?
The buyer will see on the MLS that there's two listing agents with two different brokerages. And that's when we check this box.
Okay,
When we see in the MLS LA1 and LA2, listing agent 1, listing agent 2. If we see listing agent 1, listing agent 2, we need to see who's the broker. If it's the same broker, we don't have to check this box to have two listing
the
agents.
buyer would have his or her own broker.
If they're two different brokerages, then we check this box because it says here more than one brokerage. Okay, now if it's just two different agents, I'll just show you at the end of the offer is where the agent signs. So right here, if under seller's brokerage firm, you have an opportunity to put two agents here. If there's two listing agents on a property, but they're the same brokerage, you can put one person's name here and one person's name there. There is a space for that. That's if they're in the same brokerage. If they're different brokerages, you're gonna have to check the box at the top. All right, here we go. Getting into the offer. Now, purchase price. You're gonna enter in here the purchase price. So let's say the offer is $1 million. Boom, 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 1 million. If it's a cash offer, you will check all cash. If there is not, you won't check that. Close of escrow. How many day escrow are we closing in? Now, this is a phone call I might need to make to the lender if there's a loan. Okay. So my phone call with the lender is, how long do you need to close? Can you do a 30-day? Can you do a 21-day close? Can you do 30? The lender might say we're slammed right now. We need a 45-day close. Happens.
If I may, what are some of the things that a lender runs up against? Is it the ability for the buyer to pay, to how much money they've made?
So things that can cause a delay,
Yes.
appraisal,
Oh, right.
Homeowners association.
Mm.
Those are the two major ones.
So also you have a buyer that needs to get all of their information to the lender. But what the buyer now has to put all their tax returns together, all their bank statements together. They might not have filed last year's tax return and it's past a certain date. And now they have to file it because the lender is requiring it.
Right.
So there's a lot of things here from the buyer side. Now, if the buyer has already gone through a pre-approval process and they've already submitted all that documentation, the lender's ready to go. That's a pre-approval.
So
Yeah.
I was gonna say, would you show if they're not pre-approved, they're only pre-qualified? Would you show that offer?
So there's a checkbox. There's a checkbox down here which you can choose one of them: pre-qualification or pre-approval.
Okay, good.
There.
Oh, okay.
JJ, I have a
Yeah.
question on Zoom. Hey, so in SoCal, what is the typical number of days for closing? Like out here in Georgia, it's 30 to 45 days close, regardless if it's cash or loan or whatever. So is it the same thing out there?
It's all negotiable. We like to get paid as fast as we can as agents. I recommend. So I was talking with a seller last night.
Mm-hmm.
And they were telling me they needed time to remain in the property. I said to them, I recommend having a fast escrow and a leaseback instead of a longer escrow.
Exactly.
So instead of having a 60-day escrow, let's have a 30-day escrow with a
30-day leaseback. Yeah.
Get your money. Because anything can happen. The more time you have escrow length, anything, any world activity, unknown world activity can happen. That can.
Oh yeah, I just represented a buyer here in Atlanta where we closed in 26 days, but we had a 35-day temporary occupancy. It's not. I mean.
Yeah, so that's what we have. We have 20. You can occupy up to 29 days as a license to remain in possession for 29 days. So they're not a tenant. They have a license to remain.
Just 29 days, and then anything after that is a lease back where they have to pay.
Well, so they're both termed leasebacks, but if it's 29 days or less, they're not tenants. They just have a license to remain. That's our law here in California.
How about what happens if let's say the tenant or the sellers need to stay there for 40 days, then what is the course of action?
Then that's going to be a lease. It's going to be a lease back. It's going to be an actual lease that gets filled out.
Okay, and you don't have to put you can put it for a $0 lease, right? It doesn't have to be a nominal amount.
So now we're talking about California landlord-tenant law. If you have a $0 amount on a lease, and then they choose to stay, the monthly rent is $0. So we are very tenant sided here in California as far as the law goes. It's very hard for a landlord to evict a tenant.
Okay.
So there's a lot more to it when we start to have a lease filled out.
Okay.
So I would recommend in that situation that you have a clause in the lease saying that the monthly rent for the first month is $0. If they stay past month 1, the rent shall be considered $10,000 a month.
Okay.
It should be more than the rental value as a penalty for them staying there, basically.
Yeah.
But it can't leave it at $0. There has to be a clause saying this is the new rent if they stay past that date.
Okay.
That'll protect the seller.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So close of escrow 30 days. Also, what you guys can do is instead of putting an actual number here and you want to be more aggressive, like let's say you're in multiple offers and you're trying to win. You can instead of doing that, you can click here and you can type here actually, even though it just wants you to put a date. If you put the date and then you press the space bar, it'll let you type something here. And you can say like, see addendum number 1. Okay. On addendum number 1, I might type something like close of escrow to be 30 days or less. Or buyer will close as fast as lender can close. right? Escrow to be 30 days
Mhm.
or sooner if lender can close sooner. Like I'll put something like that to be more aggressive. Because if I'm going up against a 30-day offer and mine says 30-day or less, or will close as fast as the lender can close, I'm more aggressive. I'm a better offer, maybe.
When I sold last year.
I need to get through.
Oh, yeah, no.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
But,
I'm just conscious about how much stuff there is. Okay, by default, the offer will expire in 3 calendar days at 5 p.m. So today is Thursday. If this offer is received by the seller today, it will expire Friday, Saturday, Sunday at 5 p.m. So if the seller accepts our offer before 5 p.m. on Sunday, the buyer is now under contract. Okay. All right, initial deposit, this is usually 3%. So whatever, for $1 million, 3% is going to be $30,000. I will put that in there, it's 3%. The reason we want to have a 3% deposit is because of liquidated damages, which we'll get to later in the contract. But that's the standard deposit. For land, that could be a 10% deposit on a land contract. That's very common, that's 10%. Now, it says here in the purchase contract that that deposit is due to escrow within 3 business days after acceptance by wire transfer. So this is the conversation I'm having with my buyer. Once we have an acceptance, your deposit will need to be wired to escrow within 3 business days. This is the only thing in the contract that's business days. Everything else is calendar days. Only the deposit is business days. And when you think of that thing, you can only make your deposit on a business day.
Yeah.
So it's business day.
But they can respond back on a calendar day.
They can shorten it, but no one can make their actual deposit unless it's a business day. So it's 3 business days. Increased deposit, you might have a very aggressive buyer that wants to, that you write it. You're always thinking, how can I make my offer better? How can I get my offer accepted? So this is a conversation with your buyer. Maybe your buyer, upon removal of contingency, will put more money into escrow, right? So it's just something to think about. It's not common, but it can be if you want to be very extremely aggressive. Okay, and here's the loan amount. So how much loan are we getting? We want to get an 80% loan or less to avoid private mortgage insurance. So if your buyer's putting 20% down, they won't have to pay private mortgage insurance, which makes the loan more expensive. So let's just say the loan amount is $800,000. And then we need to have an interest rate and points from the lender. So let's say the interest rate right now, 7.5% with 1 point. So the reason that I'm putting terms there is because if I use the loan to back out of the deal, I need to have something that they couldn't qualify for, right? If I'm going to use the loan as an excuse to back out of the deal, like the buyer says, my lender I can't get the loan. I'm not going to be able to use the loan, this part of it. Like let's say interest rates shoot up. I mean, for some reason, interest rates go up, my buyer didn't lock the rate. Usually what happens is once we have an accepted offer, the buyer immediately sends the offer to the lender. And the lender will say to the buyer, should we lock the rate? Here's today's rate, should we lock it? Some buyers might want to gamble and float and hopefully rates will go down a little bit. So usually what happens is the rate will lock and then that's the rate. Sometimes I'm talking to a lender today, this is the rate. This negotiation goes 2 days. And in the period of that 2 days, interest rates went up 0.5 point for whatever reason. Now my buyer's protected because they won't qualify for it.
What if the price changes? Can they change the rate?
So right now, this just has to do with the buyer qualifying or not qualifying and using it as an excuse to back out of it. That's it, it's a contingency. So you need to have a rate built in. If it's gonna be, if you want it to be part of a contingency, it's back up. Okay, so we're putting the amount of the loan, we're putting the rate. Thanks. 1 point means that this loan is gonna cost the buyer $8,000 in loan fees. That's a point. So it's 1%. So 1% of 800 is 8,000. Half a point, 4,000. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if, for example, if the interest rate go to 7.5 and then make the buyer cannot afford to buy the property.
Sounds good. I'll look for it.
So
the buyer should not put 7.5 there.
so right now I'm finding out just these things from the lender. I'm calling the lender. I'm saying, what are the rate? What's the rate? How many points? How fast can you close? 30-day, 45-day, right? How long do you need for an appraisal? And how long do you need for loan approval? Because I need to know those numbers to put into my offer.
Okay, so basically the buyer can afford.
The buyer can afford it, yeah.
Yeah,
At
the maximum.
Yeah.
The maximum. Okay.
Right, because I'm having that conversation with the lender. The lender is telling me what it's going to be approximately. So he's looking it up and he's saying right now, if they lock, I can do 7.5%, 0 points. You can put 0 in it. You weren't able to do that before on the contract. It lets you know. So if you have 7, you can put 0 points. This might tick up to 7 3/4, and they didn't lock. You could use that as an excuse to back out. All right. So.
Sorry.
Yes.
You said when the buyer puts down 20%, they don't have to.
They don't have to pay private mortgage insurance, PMI. Yeah, private mortgage insurance. So you have a lot of buyers, they get FHA loans. They only need to put 3.5% down. That's great, but they are paying a little extra money for insurance on that loan because they didn't put 20% down. All right, seller credit. So sometimes you will have a situation where the lender will instruct you how to write the offer, and they will tell you to ask for a credit from the seller. They will want you to raise your price a little bit and ask for a credit back to help with the loan, because that's how the buyer is qualifying. The lender's figuring out how to get the buyer to qualify. So they're telling you, they might guide you, I need you to have this and this and this in the loan in order to do it. This is where that credit would come in, because you're asking for a credit up front. So if I ask for a credit up front right now for $10,000, that means that my offer is not really $1 million, it's $9,990,000, right? But I'm explaining that to the listing agent when I submit my offer. I'm saying, by the way, I'm sending you a $1 million offer with a 10,000 credit. I'm telling them up front. And I need to structure the offer that way, because that's how the lender is able to do the deal. Right? Okay. There is a box here. Seller agrees to pay obligation of buyer to compensate buyer's broker under a separate agreement. If you have a buyer representation agreement signed with a buyer, okay, you work with a buyer and you had them sign a buyer representation agreement with you. If you do have one of those forms that they signed, that obligates the buyer to pay commission. But it also says on that form that if the commission comes from anyone else, meaning the seller, they are off the hook for that amount. So if I'm signing a buyer, if a buyer comes to me and says, JJ, I need you to help find me something. And I say to them, okay, this is how I work with my buyers. I have a buyer representation agreement signed. And then it puts you on the hook for 2.5%. But 99% of the time, that 2.5% is paid by the listing agent, by the listing broker. So you don't have to worry about it if you're buying a house that's listed. Don't worry about it. But I need to check this box here. If I have that agreement, seller agrees to pay the obligation of buyer to compensate buyer's broker under a separate agreement. Seller's broker, if any. So anyways, that's just letting you know. Okay, verification of all cash. So if there's an all cash offer, if you don't touch anything, it just says attached to the offer, there's proof of funds attached to the offer. So if you're submitting a cash offer, without touching anything in the offer, by default, it says that you are attaching proof of funds. Proof of funds is a bank statement. It's an account statement showing a dollar amount, person's name, and a current date. Yeah, I want to see money. Show me the money. Verification of down payment and closing costs, again, attached to the offer. For you to submit a strong offer, you should be submitting an offer with a bank statement showing the total down payment that the buyer is going to come out of pocket with. Show me the money that you need to buy the property. And you're also submitting a pre-approval if there's a loan. Verification of loan application. So I'm submitting my pre-approval. So I can check the box here, pre-qualification or pre-approval. The pre-qualification is the buyer talked to a lender over the phone. Based upon what the buyer told the lender, he's pre-qualified. Pre-approval means the buyer submitted their tax returns, checked, income stubs, whatever, and filled out an application and did all that, and he's pre-approved. Okay, he's got his credit checked, all that, he's pre-approved. That's the difference between pre-qual and pre-approval. Pre-qualification is just, from what you're telling me, yes, I can do that one.
All right. No.
Not as good.
And have fully underwritten.
Fully underwritten. Okay, fully underwritten is if you were going through like Chase or Wells Fargo, Bank of America, they cannot just issue a pre-approval to you. They have to submit everything into their system.
Yeah.
It has to go to underwriting. That's fully underwritten pre-approval. Because what the computer generated thing that gets spit out is basically a loan. It's a loan commitment, but based upon approval of the property, right? They need to approve the property, the appraisal, that they're willing to loan money on that property. So the person themselves is approved, right? That's fully underwritten. Final verification of condition. So before close of escrow, the buyer is supposed to go to the property and make sure that it's in the same condition as when they went into contract. So the seller moved out. Now the buyer needs to come in and say, the agreed upon repairs were made. No damage was done. We're moving the furniture out. Everything that was supposed to be here is here. Great. So that's by default in the contract. The buyer can do that anytime within 5 days prior to close of escrow. Here is the dangerous part, assignment request. By default, the buyer has the right to assign this contract for 17 days. Okay? This is in our contract, 17-day assignment request. So, ever I pulled up an assignment form before and I said, someone can sell their contract. And if they sell their contract, they're going to use the assignment form and they're going to have to disclose whether they're making a profit on the assignment or not. So if they sell their they can sell the contract for 50,000, 100,000. I've done it. I've done it. I had a builder. I had an accountant call me and list a house for him. Someone had passed away. They needed to sell the house for the estate. I listed the property. I called, it was a teardown. I called my builder. My builder said, I love it. We wrote an offer. We got it under contract. My builder called me and said, I'm selling, it's not for me, but I have someone else for it. And I was like, oh man. So the person came in and basically I had to disclose $100,000 profit to my builder. He made $100,000 on that. And I was so terrified of what the CPA that had me was going to say. And the CPA was like, no problem. As long as he closes, I don't care. So I was so relieved.
You have to be qualified, some qualification.
Yeah, so basically contingencies needed to be removed. If you're going to do an assignment, make sure contingencies are removed with buyer number one.
That's right.
And then you assign the contract after contingencies have been removed. And that way, buyer two is taking the contract with no contingency. Right? So in order for that to happen, all the disclosures need to go first to buyer one. Buyer one needs to sign all the disclosures, right, and return them. Then part of the assignment, the original contract, all the disclosures go to buyer number 2. He signs them all, and then we get the assignment signed. And then that's a lock deal, right? And then there have to be arrangements made in escrow to return buyer number 1's deposit. So that's not going to happen until buyer number 2 makes their deposit, and then they can return buyer number 1's deposit. Just got to watch that whole process.
What are the contingency you need to remove before the buyer number 2?
Because why should buyer 1 be let off the hook? I mean, basically buyer number 1 wants to make money.
Right.
And we need to make sure that there's money. I mean, we want to make sure that
Close.
I just don't want to lose. I don't want to lose the whole deal. Obviously everyone wants the deal to go through, but I don't want buyer number 2 playing games.
Yeah.
Because there's already games.
Yeah,
I don't want more games.
So the buyer number 2 come in without any contingency.
Correct. Well, they're correct.
Can buyer
They're
number 2,
reviewing all the inspections from buyer number 1.
can buyer number 2 assign it to somebody else too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
It happens. It happens.
100,000.
Even the
Another
loan
100,000.
contingency and everything.
All contingencies removed before the seller accepts the assignment. If I'm advising a seller, I will advise them not to accept the assignment until all contingencies are removed. And then buyer number 2 can accept a non-contingent offer.
That's true.
Yeah, we don't want any more games. There are already games.
In what situations do you reassign?
Any situation, because here it says assignment request 17 days.
But if you write or assignee,
Yeah,
then
same thing.
then it doesn't need to be 17 days, right?
Well, here, no, even if you're writing assignee, because here it says the assignment request is 17 days.
Okay.
Now the seller, we'll look later in the contract about that. Okay. Now, 2 of the things that you were asking the lender, how fast can you close the escrow? We do a 30-day escrow. What's the rate, the loan rate, interest rate, the points? These are the other things you were asking the lender. How long do you need for loan approval? And how long do we need for appraisal? So by default in the contract, there's 17 days.
Excuse me, if we are the listing agent, we can ask the buyer's lender these questions?
So right now we're writing an offer, so we're representing the buyer.
We are
I'm just taking this from the perception of the buyer's agent right now.
Okay.
Because we're writing an offer. So we're calling the lender of our buyer and asking them, how many days do you need to fully approve the loan and get an appraiser to the property and get the appraisal done? Because we need to remove these contingencies for the seller on time. Okay, investigation of property by default 17 days. Your buyer has 17 days to inspect the property. That's a long time. You don't need 17 days to inspect the property. I can get an accepted offer today, get my inspectors in there tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday. I don't need that much time. I need 7 days, 8 days, but I might call my inspector just to make sure he's available. Because if I have an inspector that I like to use, other agents probably also like to use him, and I want to make sure he's available. So if he's not available, I want to know his first availability. I'll tell him, pencil me in for that date. And he usually will. And then I'll shorten my contingency inspection period. Now, that's my most important inspection, is my general inspection. He's the guy that goes through everything. Then there's the sewer inspection, the chimney inspection, the termite inspection. All those people I will schedule for the same time that my general can go. My general is the most important. I'll get everyone else there at the same time. And the reason that I do it at the same time is because I don't want to make 5 million trips to the house. Like, everything can be done at the same time. The general can do his thing, the sewer, the chimney, it can all be done at the same time. I don't need to get the other agent there, me there, and everyone there, all different times, back and forth. Yeah, at the same time, 100%. Yeah, why not?
The general inspector can object, said he don't like way.
Yeah, he won't object. They all know each other. I'll say hi, hey.
Hold on.
No problem.
It's good to know that.
Informational access to property. So even if you shorten your inspection period to say 7 days, even if you do that, the buyer can still have a right to access the property, not as a contingency, but maybe they want to take measurements, right? Or they want their designer to come and take a look. The buyer can still come into the property. Review of seller documents. So the seller has an obligation to disclose everything that they know. They have to fill out disclosures. They have 7 days to do it. We have 17 days to review it, or 5 days, whichever is later. So here is a loophole in the contract, basically. You can have a non-contingent offer, right? I can remove all contingencies with this offer. However, if I'm delivered a seller mandatory disclosure, it's going to give me 5 days from delivery to approve that.
What are those disclosures?
Disclosures in the transfer disclosure statement, seller property questionnaire, fire zone, flood zone, earthquake zone, mold. These are just disclosures, but the transfer disclosure statement and the seller property questionnaire have to be hand filled out. So that's where the seller is saying, has anyone died on the property in the past 3 years? Yes or no?
Okay.
Are you aware of any encroachments on the property? Do you share anything in common with those neighbors? Are you aware of any neighborhood noise? Things like that. So the buyer will have 5 days to approve that, even if there's no contingencies.
NHD.
NHD, 5 days to approve it.
What about the robbery or murder in the neighbor, not in the house?
Yeah. So
You have to report that one. I mean,
in the neighbor's house? No.
in the neighborhood area.
So okay, so
I mean,
I never want to say no,
No.
which I just did.
you just have to we can ask them.
Here's the test for your question. Do you think the answer to that question may have an effect on the buyer's decision buy or not buy the property?
Yes.
If the answer is yes, you should disclose.
So disclose, right. If they don't change, so,
Right?
okay, that's different.
You don't know everything about whether.
Yeah, if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
So your obligation is to
The thing
disclose
that
what
you
you
know.
know. That's it.
Okay.
That's your-
Fine.
So, JJ, I have a quick
Yes.
question. So, is this 17 days like considered a due diligence period, or is that something different? Do you guys have a
Yes.
different due diligence period?
That's exactly what it is. It's your due diligence period.
Okay, and is there a way to waive that 17 days, like in case of whatever reason, or is it 17 days regardless?
You can, if you're going to waive inspections,
Mhm.
then make sure that the buyer signs a waiver form.
Okay, but
Because-
what if
Oh,
they
look-
want to like lower it to like, let's say they want to do it to 10 days, then how
Yeah,
do you?
so that's right there. That's what I did. I shortened it to 7 days right there.
Okay, and that would
That'll
Oh.
shorten their investigation part. So now what I'll do here is, just so it looks good to the seller,
Mhm.
I'll shorten all these to 7.
Okay. Oh, okay. I see.
Okay.
So, but
Now-
before was 17.
Yeah, now I've changed 17 to 7. A listing agent will love that.
Okay, cool.
There is something here on the right. It says removal or waiver. Any contingency may be removed or waived by checking the applicable box or attaching a contingency removal form. Removal or waiver at time of offer is against agent advice. And that's why we want them to sign the waiver, because brokers always recommend inspecting a property. It's very dangerous to buy a property without inspecting it. We don't want to get sued by a buyer that says, my agent told me I could write an offer without inspecting the property, and they're gonna try to blame it on us.
No.
So we need them to sign a waiver if they're gonna buy no contingencies at all. Sale of buyer's property. Yeah.
So I want to make sure if I write a non-contingent cash buyer.
Yeah.
You're saying that we still have 5 days to back out and not losing.
Once
anything.
disclosures are given to you, yes.
We can just review the disclosures.
Yeah, so I don't agree with the disclosure, and the contract says I have 5 days to approve. Yeah,
And they have to return their
pretty much, yeah.
pretty much or 100%.
Nothing is 100%. I mean, there could be a fight, but they're gonna lose. There could be a fight. They will lose, yeah.
Whose name? Which
The
one?
seller.
The seller.
The seller's gonna have to return the money, even though they're kicking and screaming,
Right.
because of that 5-day period.
If you don't like disclosure, you are back. Come
So
back.
as a listing agent, if I'm receiving an offer non-contingent, I'm going to respond with my counteroffer with all the disclosures. If that gets accepted, it's accepted. And then they can lose their deposit.
But if you remove all your contingency, you still have 5 days, but on this.
Wait, you have 5 days to approve a mandatory disclosure that's given to you after that.
After they deliver to you, right?
Correct, but if it's delivered to you before there's an acceptance, then you can't back out on it. It has to be delivered to you after acceptance.
Oh, after acceptance.
Right, if there's a new disclosure that's delivered to you after acceptance, there's a 5-day window of approval.
Okay, but after acceptance, and then they deliver the disclosures, and then if you don't like something on the disclosures, there's nothing wrong about that disclosure, but you just don't like it, you can back out.
Yes.
Yeah. You don't like whatever they said there?
Yeah, back out. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, now,
For any reason.
I don't think my Zoom is sharing.
For any
No,
reason.
it is.
It is?
Yep.
Okay, someone had texted that it wasn't. It says you are screen sharing.
But there's nothing wrong with that disclosure. So you basically can back up for any reason.
You can back out.
For any
A
reason.
buyer can back out during their inspection period. Yeah.
Like
And if they don't have an inspection period and they're given a new
5 days.
a mandatory disclosure, then they have 5 days to approve it. So yeah, it's yeah, but
I would say that I don't like the sprinkler. I can back out.
okay, so now if you're going to back out,
Uh,
don't use an excuse to back out.
Use of,
There's on the cancellation of contract, when you fill out the cancellation of contract and it says, why are you canceling? You're going to say based upon paragraph 14. So that's what you want to do, because if you use an excuse, what if they fix the excuse?
Yeah.
Right? Then all of a sudden there's no more excuse.
But they will ask specific reason about.
You're not giving it. You're not giving it. You're not giving it. You don't have to give it. You can say I'm based upon my inspections. I'm not going through the deal. You back out based upon paragraph 14. If you back out based upon paragraph 14, an attorney can find 100,000 reasons why you're backing out.
Yeah.
If you back out based upon one reason, that's arguable, and that could be fixed. If you back out based upon the paragraph,
Correct.
there can be a laundry list of why you're backing out.
Yeah.
Wow.
So just back out based upon the paragraph.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
What kind of disclosure may be sent after they sign, or why?
All disclosures are usually sent after they're signed, after we have an agreement signed. After, yeah, because I'm not giving disclosures to a buyer that I'm not even in contract with.
Yes.
I don't want them to know anything about my property. They don't have any money in escrow. Who are they? I'm not just giving information to someone.
And that is all of the disclosure. They have 5 days to.
No. So by default, they have 17.
That's what I mean.
I'm shortening it. I'm shortening it to make my offer more aggressive right now.
Oh, by default.
By default, 17 days. Yeah, because this says review of seller documents. It says 17 days after acceptance or 5 days after delivery, whichever is later.
5 or 17.
Yeah. So just know that a seller has to give disclosures. If you don't want that 5-day window, give the disclosures with the counter offer. Right? And then they accept after they've received the disclosures.
If you leave it blank, it's going to be 5 days after.
If you leave it blank, could be 17.
17 or 5?
17. Okay, let's read that again.
Yes, sir.
17 days after acceptance though.
Yeah.
After acceptance. So let's say I give disclosures on day 4. They have 17 minus 4.
Yeah. So what is that 4 or 5 days after?
4 or 5 days after, whichever is later. So let's say I don't give disclosures until day 15. On day 15, I give disclosures because my seller was out of town, he couldn't do it.
5 days.
I had technical problems, there's a bunch of excuses. The disclosures go on day 15. And my contract was 17, right? 17 days. Now, the buyer, it's not fair that the buyer now only has 2 days to review, and then the seller can cancel if they don't remove contingencies. So it's saying that, no, it's 5, they have 5 days. 17 days after acceptance of the offer, or 5 days, whichever is later.
Nothing less than 5 days.
Nothing less than 5 days, right? They have 5 days to review.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry, but what could be the default? What caused the default of sending the disclosure? Like they forget?
So like right now I have a seller. I have offers that have come in. We've sent counter offers out. I need to meet with my seller to fill out disclosures. I haven't done that yet. So there could be an acceptance today. And then the seller has 7 days to give disclosures. Hopefully I'll be able to arrange a time with them to meet within the next 7 days and fill them out and get them to the buyer. What if I can't? What if they can't? Something happens, and we just can't. And they can't be done until day 9 or 10 or 11. It just happens. Life happens, right? So it just happens. So this is just protecting the buyer, that the buyer has 5 days to review, right? It's protecting the buyer. What if a disclosure comes and it says that there's something about the property, there's an argument with the neighbor about a tree. There's a tree that the neighbor wants it cut down because half of it's on his property, half of it's on your property. It's always ruining his car. There's a dispute. The buyer doesn't want to buy a property where there's a dispute with the neighbor. He wants to go meet with the neighbor, and then the neighbor's saying, "I'm not at home for 3 days or 4 days." So we need 5 days. It just protects the buyer, right? To have time to talk to the neighbor. That's just an example, that they have time to get together. All right. Time of possession. This is saying, so if you're going to write an offer where the buyer needs to sell their property first before they can buy, like the money that they're using to buy is from a sale. You're gonna check the box here, sale of buyer's property.
That's the first contingency.
This is the contingency. It's gonna attach a form contingency of property. So now, if I'm a listing agent and I receive an offer that says that this is contingent upon the buyer selling their property, I'm gonna wanna ask the buyer's agent, where do they live? How much is it currently listed? How much are they going to list it for? I want to make sure they're realistic.
Yeah.
Like not someone who's tying up my property and they're going to try to get some crazy price that they'll never get. So I might put in my counter offer. A buyer agrees to list such and such address at such and such price within such and such amount of time after acceptance.
Oh,
okay. I can put that in mind. I want to make sure they're listing at a reasonable price, that they're going to have a deal, right? Okay, time of possession. Usually what happens is there's a grantee that gets signed by the seller. I, seller, hereby grant my property to buyer. And that document gets recorded downtown. That's when actual transfer of ownership occurs, is when that document is recorded. So this just says that the buyer can possess the property upon notice of recordation. That's it. Seller occupied or vacant units. Usually the property will be delivered vacant. Now, if the seller wants to stay in the property, we were talking about this a little earlier. If the seller wants to stay in the property past close of escrow, there's 2 options here. For 29 days or less, you're going to check this box. For 30 days or more, you're going to check this box. The difference is 29 or fewer days is not a lease. It's a license to remain in possession, which is different than a lease. If it's 30 days or more, that's going to be a lease back. So the difference is a license to remain in possession. If the seller stays on day 30, the buyers can call the police and remove them, because their license expired. If it's a lease, they might have to go through a formal eviction process. So there is danger to having a lease for 30 or more days. There is danger. Now, if you're going to do it, I recommend having a penalty built into the lease that says if the buyer stays longer than if the seller remains in the property longer than this amount of time, the new lease amount will be this much money. And you might also want the rent to be paid upfront through escrow, right, in advance.
But you cannot withhold any money, any seller money.
You can withhold it.
You can withhold like 2 months rent or 3 months.
Why not? It's part of the agreement. Why not?
Oh, you can,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
If it's 30 days or more, but if it's 29 days and that license, you don't need to put penalty.
No, you don't need to put a penalty because they're not tenants.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not tenants. Okay, seller delivery of documents. 7 days. So this is where it says that the seller has 7 days to deliver disclosures. 7 days. Sign and return escrow holder. Okay, so basically the buyer and seller have to sign escrow instructions within 5 days. The seller has to order HOA documents within 3 days. The seller also has to install smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, water heater bracing within 7 days. This is a weird one because I used to, as the listing agent, I need to make sure that this is all done prior to close of escrow. I usually wouldn't order this until contingencies were removed. When the buyer removed contingencies, that's when I called the retrofitting company and had them come install the smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, because this costs money and I don't want the seller to have to pay for it unless the buyer is doing the deal. So I used to wait for contingencies to be removed. The retrofitting company would come, they would install the smoke alarms, whatever they needed to do, and they would bill escrow and get paid at close of escrow. That's how I used to do it. The new contract, this contract is now saying that the seller needs to do it within 7 days. Contingencies haven't been removed yet. So this means that the seller may be out of pocket for this money if the buyer doesn't complete the deal. Right? So it's just something to be aware of.
It's a 10-day escrow, you can shorten that time.
You can always shorten it. Everything in the entire contract is negotiable.
But what do you recommend if it's just 10 days?
I don't think anyone makes a big deal out of this. The only place I can see this becoming a big deal is on an FHA loan. There's a special appraiser that comes. The appraiser has to do extra things for the FHA loan. And appraisers need to see smoke alarms. They might have to take pictures of it actually for their appraisal. So, I mean, that's probably why it's here, because of the appraisal. So something to be aware of. I used to carry a carbon monoxide detector in my trunk, a plug-in one, just so the appraiser could take a picture of it. If I'm going to an appraisal appointment, I'll probably go to my file cabinet, take out a carbon monoxide and put it in my car and bring it with me. It's seriously, I mean, because the appraisal won't be able to go through without them taking a picture of it installed. So, all right.
The carbon monoxide.
Carbon monoxide has to be there.
Oh, for appraiser.
All right, here's where we get to ask the seller what we want included in our offer. So this is very important because if things say that it's included or excluded in the marketing materials on the MLS, in emails, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is the contract. So if on the MLS it says living room chandelier or dining room chandelier is excluded, on every marketing material it says dining room chandelier is excluded. You have an email from the listing agent to you saying the dining room chandelier is excluded, but it's not excluded in this contract. It comes with the property. Okay, the contract is the contract. Nothing else matters besides the contract. Because everything in life is negotiable. The buyer can say, yeah, I paid extra for that chandelier. I know they excluded it, but my offer I wrote because it included it, right? This Wallack chandelier, whatever. All right, but here's where your opportunity is to check all these things: stove, refrigerator, wine refrigerator. I want the washer, the dryer, the dishwasher, microwave. I want the video doorbell, security equipment. I want everything. The wall brackets.
Essential offer.
So here, check this one out though. Potted trees and shrubs. This is personal property now we're talking about. But part of this property, part of the part of the extravagance and beauty of this property is all the beautiful potted plants that are all around. Check this box, they come with property.
For me, if it's something exotic, trees, somebody in the pot.
Yeah.
Yes, living, you say?
I once sold a property on Robertson.
Uh-huh.
We were in contract and the listing agent said, I represented a buyer, and the listing agent said to me, oh, by the way, all the plants in the front that are in the ground came from the seller's grandfather in Hawaii, and they're going to take them out with them. Oh. I said, oh, no, you're not. You know, in the ground.
But if it's spotted, you could argue about it. If it is on the way.
Anyways, that deal unfortunately didn't go through, but I'm just saying, like,
before they sell it or.
So I always advise,
so
I advise a seller, if they're going to exclude something like the chandelier, remove it now and replace it now. Because anyone that says, if you tell someone they can't have something, they want it more. Right?
That's right.
Right? So do it now and it won't be an issue later.
Right.
That's my advice. But you can.
Or you can put it in the outfit chandeliers on the private remark, chandelier.
Yeah, but you can put it in the private remarks, but it doesn't matter if you didn't do it in the contract. So when you receive an offer, you have to give a counter offer, and your counter offer says dining room chandelier is excluded. It has to be in the counter offer. Yeah, don't forget. Don't forget. You could be owing your seller a dining room chandelier.
That's something great.
You know those the crystal chandeliers on Rodeo Drive in the holidays?
Yeah.
They were 15 years ago $1 million each.
Oh, God.
$1 million each 15 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. Natural hazard zone disclosure. Usually we're gonna ask the seller to pay for that, provided by MyNHD. Check environmental. Smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, we want the seller to pay for. Government required point of sale inspections, reports, seller. Corrective remedial actions. Now, in an FHA loan, FHA, the FHA appraiser is going to come in and he has an additional checklist that he's looking for. Peeling paint. I don't know what the whole checklist is, but if this is checked, this box right here, that means the seller is going to be responsible for those corrective items. So just be careful with that. It's something to be aware of.
You recommend this to be checked?
If you're representing an FHA buyer, then check the box. If you're a listing agent receiving this, be careful.
But non-HFA, you don't put it.
Yeah, there's no reason to check unless it's an FHA. Yeah.
Is this like the inspection?
This is just the offer, and it's saying who's going to pay for what, buyer or seller.
Yeah. I mean, like that. This one is it like?
So everywhere in California, you have to have smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, and water heater bracing. That's everywhere in California.
That's the next one.
The next one is going to be government required point of sale inspections or reports.
Like City of Pasadena, when they sell, they require City of Pasadena.
Correct. This is the seller is paying for that. That's correct.
Okay. And which other city that has
any city that has it, you're just checking seller. So if they have a certificate of compliance or something that needs to get signed before closing, the seller is responsible.
Okay.
That's all. Now the next one is asking the seller to pay for actual corrective action. So on an FHA loan, there can't be any peel and paint, as an example. That means that you're asking the seller to pay for painting on those areas if it needs it. So you might check this box if you're representing an FHA buyer. If you are a listing agent receiving an offer with an FHA loan, you might want to have in your counter offer that the buyer will be responsible for any required repairs to get the FHA loan. Right.
Will that actually fly?
Well, they can choose to buy it or not buy it. Right.
It wouldn't fly.
It wouldn't fly. It's coming from a lender. Yeah. It wouldn't fly.
The seller is responsible. The seller has
to do it. So you have to be really careful as a seller. You have to tell your seller if you're agreeing to this. If you agree to this property with an FHA loan, You might be responsible. Now, they did change the FHA agreement though. It used to say that the seller was responsible. And now it's not like that. I don't, we'll look at it. Yep.
Sorry, what was the lead paint? What was the year that it?
1978.
What year?
1978.
78.
So before 1978, most paint had lead in it. Yeah.
That's the same year as rent control,
Rent control.
78, right?
So rent control has even gone past 78 now. So it just depends. Whenever you're asking if something's under rent control, you need to really call the city and ask them. Give them the address and ask them.
The map change.
Huh?
The map changed.
The map changed?
The map changed. The
rules.
of the rent control.
Things are always changing,
Yeah.
always. But the only accurate answer you're gonna get is to call the city, give them the address and ask them, is this under rent control? Right? That's the answer. There's no other answer. It's call the city, give them the address and then get their name.
Oh.
Okay, escrow fee. Okay, the way that I fill this out when I'm writing an offer is I want the buyer and seller to both pay. And I want them to both pay the same low rate.
The seller usually more than the buyer. You know, when we had the class before, they would say that it's a different fee between.
I want to make sure that my buyer is paying the same rate as the seller.
Oh, really?
My buyer.
Oh,
I want my buyer to pay the same escrow rate as the seller,
but
right?
usually the rate is seller has to pay more than the buyer.
No. Escrow fees are usually the same on both sides.
Is it?
Usually. But I might have a very clever listing agent on the other side of this deal. I'm writing my offer now, representing my buyer. I might have a very clever listing agent that has a favorite escrow company
Yes.
that bills the buyer a
Right.
huge fee and a very small fee to the seller. Now I'm saying that I want them both to pay the same low rate.
How did the buyer know?
Yeah, but the buyer doesn't know. That's why I put it in.
But even you put it in,
Oh, okay.
don't know.
There are still tricks that escrow can do. Escrow can have a big amount and then they can credit back. You can say credit from escrow. So if they do it like that, I'll never know. Right, on the final statement, it might say escrow fee $6,000, but then there's a credit from escrow back to the buyer for $5,500.
Isn't that?
It could be, like, I don't know.
Usually the seller pays for escrow?
Both paid for escrow, both. Yeah, buyer and seller have their own escrow fees. Yeah.
So you don't put each to pay their own fees, like?
I don't do that because if you do that, they could be different.
yeah,
Okay,
And I'm just trying to protect,
we were told different.
protecting my buyer.
the buyer, yeah.
Okay.
Escrow holder is going to be Cannon Hills Closings, Pelly. That's our escrow officer in-house.
So if I represent the buyer, I don't know how much escrow fee the seller pay because I don't see the settlement on the seller side.
Right, so you can ask for your own escrow here. And if the seller counters you with their escrow company, you can pick up the phone and call the escrow officer and say, how much are you charging for escrow?
Oh,
And is that negotiable?
okay.
Right, I received an offer the other day and in the additional terms down here, other terms, it said escrow fee not to exceed whatever per thousand. So they put in their terms that they don't want the escrow fee to be higher than,
Why?
yeah.
Is that reasonable?
It is smart.
It's smart. It's smart. So yeah, it's smart. Okay, owner's title policy. The seller will pay the owner's title policy. And clear mark title is our title. Venus Spitz, we got Jerry. Paris.
So Lauren is not here? I mean, Lauren.
So Clearmark is owned by Paul Morris, I think.
Oh.
So we like to use Clearmark.
Hey.
But I love Lauren.
We
I
can
love
still choose.
Brenda. You can choose who you want.
Children.
Choose who you want.
Lauren is
Now,
nice.
normally not normal, but well, a lot of times the listing agent is already gonna have an existing relationship with the title company.
Right.
So I'm gonna try for our title. I'm gonna try. They'll sometimes the listing agent will insist on their escrow company.
Yes, they do.
But you can try to insist on our title company because you're giving them escrow. So you'll try to, but again, it depends who you're dealing with. So if you're dealing with an agent that's been doing this for a long time and they have relationships, they've been using the same people for many, many years, it's going to be hard to get that done. Okay, so the seller will be paying for the buyer's title policy. If your buyer gets a loan, that's totally on the buyer side, has nothing to do with the seller. So this, if for the buyer, we're asking the seller to pay for that insurance for the buyer. But if the buyer chooses on their own to get a loan, the buyer is going to pay the title insurance for the lender. Right? It has nothing to do with the seller. Right? If the buyer is all cash, the seller is paying for the title insurance for the buyer. That's it. If the buyer decides to get a loan, the buyer is going to have to insure their lender. Just how there's not even an option to change it. I'm just showing you the buyer's lender's title insurance policy. The buyer is paying for that. Okay, county transfer taxes and city transfer taxes we're asking the seller to pay for. If the property is in an HOA, we're going to ask the seller to pay for that. If there's private transfer fees, sometimes oh, by the way, this is now marked seller automatically for private transfer fees, which is huge. I love that CAR did that. There are properties in Marina Del Rey that have large private transfer fees. Marina City Towers, I think. I think they have like a 3% private transfer fee.
3%?
Yes. Yes.
Is it because you don't own the land? You just lease the
whatever it is. They have a seller private. It's private transfer fee. The contract didn't used to be like this, and I used to always include in my contracts where it said private transfer fees. I used to said seller if any. I always did it. I always added it to the contract, and I protected one of my sellers. We didn't know, and the seller had to pay it because I put that in the contract. I was so lucky.
Is it all Marina Del Rey or just that?
It's not just that particular property, but I'm sure there are others in the area also. Home warranty plan. So we do want to ask the seller to pay for a home warranty plan. Seller not to exceed, I don't know, $1,200. We'll have to look. Old Republic, Fidelity National. So there are 3 home warranty companies that will lower our E&O insurance deductible if we use them. Old Republic, Fidelity, and I think
American Home Shield.
Yeah, I think those first 3, if we select any of them, it'll lower our E&O. I have it on my shared folder. It says CRES, the CRES policies. I have them in my shared folder.
Or you put CRES, and then you get the money.
If you use them,
you have to use
it'll
them.
lower our deductible.
You have to use CRES, you have to use those 3.
You don't have to. It'll just lower our deductible if you do.
Oh.
You can use anyone you want, but
if you happen to use anybody else?
If you happen to use those 3.
Oh, okay.
So these 3 are all CRES related.
Right, okay.
So if you use any of them, then it will reduce our deductible if there's an issue.
Right.
So it's good. Okay, I put in here in other terms. Seller agrees to initial paragraphs 29 and 31, liquidated damages and arbitration. The reason that I'm putting that in my offer is because if we send an offer and the seller accepts our offer and then they do not initial those 2 paragraphs, we now have a accepted offer. It's enforceable, and those two paragraphs don't apply. Because in California, you can have an accepted offer, and any part of the contract that requires initialing by both parties, if one of the parties does not initial it, it's not part of the contract.
Is it 3% in there or something like that?
I'm just talking about these paragraphs.
Oh,
29 and 31. So liquidated damages and arbitration. If my buyer is initialing those 2 paragraphs right now, and I'm sending my offer to the seller, If the seller accepts the offer and doesn't initial those two paragraphs, they are not part of the agreement. Okay?
Not what?
They're not part of the agreement. That's why I'm adding this clause here in other terms. Seller agrees to initial paragraphs 29 and 31. Now, if they accept the offer and don't initial those two places, I need to call the agent and say, oh, by the way, look at where I put in other terms. Please ask your seller to sign because that was part of the thing. If they decide not to initial it, they need to send me a counteroffer saying that they don't agree to those terms.
Can we see the 29th?
Yeah, we're gonna get there. Yeah, for sure. If you are representing yourself, and you have to disclose that buyer is representing self in this transaction. If your buyer has a license, a real estate license, you have to disclose it. Buyer has California real estate license. If you're related to the buyer,
They have to put the license number in?
no, you don't need to put the license. If you're related to the buyer, you need to disclose that. Buyer is related to buyer's in. We'll go back to, okay, it's 29 and 31, so we'll go look at that.
31 basically means when any disagreement, they need to go to, they don't go to court right directly.
These are the two paragraphs that require initials. So it's the only part of the contract that has 3 places for initialing. The very bottom, that box, and that box. So this one page requires 3 places. This is what you're talking about, arbitration. So the contract calls for mediation. If there's a dispute between the buyer and the seller, they will try to work out their differences at mediation. If we can't do it, we're going to try to get them to meet together with a mediator who will try to come up with a solution satisfactory to both parties. If they can't work it out, it will go to arbitration. Arbitration is binding. It's just faster than court. So arbitration is usually an off-duty judge or retired judge or a professional arbitrator that has a long history of real estate experience, but it's binding. So it has to be initialed by both parties. Now, for a seller, arbitration is probably really good to have initialed by both parties for a seller, because if you don't, a seller could be, their property could be tied up in court for years and they won't be able to sell it, right? If there's a dispute.
And how much they charge?
I don't know.
About,
I really,
but there is a charge.
there's arbitrators charge per hour. Yeah, probably.
The lawyer, they charge.
The lawyers charge and the arbitrator charge.
Between $500 to $1,000 an hour.
Now, liquidated damages is another part that needs to be initialed by both parties. If buyer fails to complete the purchase because of the buyer's default, what does that mean?
He has to
It means
pay
the
for
buyer,
damage.
yeah, but what is buyer's default? Buyer means the buyer's backing out.
Change his mind.
But we're talking about a situation now where the buyer did their inspection, removed their inspection contingency, their loan contingency, and their appraisal contingency. And now they're fully committed to buying this property. Now, and they don't. That's what situation we're talking about. If buyer fails to complete the purchase because of the buyer's default, the seller shall retain as liquidated damages the deposit actually paid. That means if you write an offer, excuse me, or receive an offer that only has a $5,000 deposit or $10,000 deposit, that's all the seller is entitled to keep, because it's the deposit actually paid.
Up to 30.
Exactly. It says if the property is dwelling with no more than 4 units, one of which the buyer intends to occupy, then the amount retained shall be no more than 3% of the purchase price. Any excess shall be returned to the buyer. So if you have a buyer that wants to put 5% deposit, 10% deposit, because it's making them look strong, the seller still can only keep 3%.
Right. Oh, really?
Yes.
They can't. Oh.
Only 3%.
They cannot take the entire.
Only 3%. So liquidated damages is a pre. It's a pre-agreement. It gets returned to the buyer.
Oh, yes.
So I think the best is like put more as an initial deposit.
You can now, but here's the thing with putting more. Release of funds will require mutual signed release instructions from both buyer and seller. So try to get the seller to agree to release, right?
I want all the money.
So
what happened?
The seller wants to spite the buyer. The seller is upset, and there's like, I'm not signing it.
Money gets tied up.
Money gets tied up. Fight.
Okay.
Right. So Put so as a listing agent, I want the 3% because as a listing agent, I want my seller to get 3% if the buyer backs them, right? Liquidated damages is a pre-agreed amount of damages. It's really hard to determine what damages are in real estate. It can be a lot, right? It's the same estimate. We're agreeing up front is 3%. This is good for a buyer to limit their downside risk to 3%. If the buyer does not initial liquidated damages, their risk can be a lot more than 3%. Okay. If a buyer goes into a contract today on $1 million property, and this is not initialed by both parties, and then they back out. And let's just say, I used an example before. Let's say this is a property in Maui, and all of a sudden there were fires everywhere. Now the $1 million property is now worth $500,000 because there's no more city. So they didn't initial this, and they back out. Now the seller goes and sells the property for $500,000 instead of the $1 million. They come and sue buyer number one for $500,000.
But in this case, a change of condition is not the same as the contract.
But they didn't initial liquidated damages. They can still buy the property for $1 million.
So
they're choosing not to. But because they didn't initial this and limit their downside risk to 3%, they're now responsible for $500,000. The seller just sold it for $500,000. They had $500,000 damages. Right? Buyer number one was paying $1 million, backed out after contingencies are removed. Now he sells it for $500,000.
Right.
He lost $500,000. He's going to sue buyer one for $500,000.
Even though it's a change condition, it
doesn't matter. Right. But the buyer could have prevented that situation by initially.
By saying, right.
Now we can't give legal advice, so we can't say I advise you to sign this. But you can give an example of why they should.
You have a chance to lose that much money,
but we can't. It's up to them. I mean, we can't tell them do it. You can't do that. But you can say consult with someone.
When we do the DocuSign, it's there.
Okay, now this is interesting. Thank you for bringing this up. In DocuSign, this is optional.
It's optional?
Everything, when you send a DocuSign, everything is yellow. It's yellow, 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 click, 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 click. These are white.
Okay.
And they're optional. When you're in DocuSign, you have to click them and then over here go to required. So you're actually going to be changing it from optional to required.
So when you set it up, you need to.
So I'm being recorded, and because I'm being recorded, I have to tell you that it's optional.
Oh, okay.
When I'm not being recorded, I might tell you that I'm changing this to required.
Yeah, because to protect everybody.
Yeah. It's very easy to have them not initialed by accident. So I'm trying to help
usually
that accident not to occur.
But usually listing agent will remind saying that.
But don't forget, the buyer does see what I wrote in the additional terms. The buyer is seeing that we're asking the seller to agree that they initial 2931. It's not like I'm doing it and they're not seeing that. The buyer sees this additional term, right? So I'm having this conversation with them of we want them, and if I'm putting this here and the buyer is signing it, they're asking me why is that there? I'm having that conversation with the buyer because we're writing the offer, right? So the reason I'm putting this in other terms, seller agrees to initial paragraphs 29 and 31, is to protect the buyer for the liquidated damages. I want to make sure liquidated damages gets initial. Right. Make sense, everyone?
Just in case seller didn't sign that part, you still have this language.
I have that to protect the buyer. To protect the buyer. Yeah. Okay. So I think I covered myself, recorded or not recorded, because I added that clause. All right. All right. So let's just continue. There's just a little bit more.
Short sale addendum.
May I ask
What's
a
that?
question about
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, thank you.
when we disclose something like I tell the seller or the buyer that this person is related to me, does it have to be written or
It has to be
just
written, it has to be disclosed.
Yeah,
Here's
because-
the reason.
everything should be written?
Here's the reason.
Yes.
Um,
They might forget.
no, here's the reason. I've talked to you about buying your property for 10 years. You hate me. Right? I'm telling you, sell me this property, sell me this property. It's not worth, you're crazy. It's not worth this much money. You hate me. I know that if I write an offer to you, you're not accepting my offer. You hate me. You don't care. Even if I offered you $2 million, you're not taking my offer. You hate me. And I get my cousin to write the offer for me. Right? The money's mine, but I'm giving it to him. He needs to disclose. Like
He's related to.
He's related to the agent. Like if I'm the agent, I'm the one, right? I need to disclose that or whatever the relationship is. If I'm using my cousin to buy it.
If you buy under his name, total under his name, can you transfer it to the?
So whenever there's a transfer of ownership, you have to pay transfer taxes, county and city. So that does make it cost prohibitive to do that.
So is there any special disclosure for this matter or?
Yes, it's right above there, other terms. Buyer is related to buyer's agent. I put it right there.
Oh,
Buyer is related to buyer's agent.
okay, thanks.
Is there any sort of contingency regards to the HOA?
There is, it's part of your investigation. So investigation of property, the HOA documents need to, right here, the seller is responsible for the fee. And then they're responsible for the transfer fees. But they are responsible for ordering the HOA documents. Here, time to pay fees for ordering HOA documents, 3 days. So escrow needs to order these HOA documents immediately upon escrow opening. And the seller, they're gonna ask the seller for a check for it.
Yeah.
Or a credit card.
Seller or buyer?
The seller.
Okay. From a lending perspective.
Yeah.
Whenever there is an HOA, first of all, it's a nightmare for me.
Yes.
I hate dealing with them.
Right. They don't do anything on time.
Yeah.
No, right.
So we have to get condo docs and make sure that the property or the is approved by Fannie Freddie. If it's not, then I would have to find a different lender that's going to do the deal. That's not conforming. But typically speaking, HOAs don't care about any sort of timeline. They take their time.
Right.
And the buyer has to pay for the docs.
Buyer has to pay.
Yeah.
So in my practice personally, when I list a condo, I will ask the seller to order documents, HOA docs immediately through the escrow company that I'm going to use.
Okay.
Because if they don't go through escrow, they're not official. So instead of me ordering them directly from the HOA, I will tell them, I'll tell the escrow that I'm gonna have my seller do that. So let's say Pele is the escrow officer, right? I'll go to Pele and I'll say, Pele, I just took a listing at this condo. I want you to order HOA docs and bill my seller. And I'm gonna explain to my seller, you're gonna be getting a call from escrow about the HOA docs. We need to do this now so there's no delay.
I think there's 2 sets. There's a condo questionnaire that the lender.
Oh, they have to fill out. They have to fill it out. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you do that for your listings,
I do that for my listings.
That's amazing.
Because I want.
I'd love to do a deal with you. That's gonna fly.
I just am trying to be in a situation where if I have a buyer that needs to move very quickly, that I'm able to accommodate and not delay. So I know that there's delays. Getting the HOA to fill out the questionnaire is a big one.
Yeah, there's also in our condo, the HOA hired a management company.
Right.
Yeah, and so.
Some are really efficient and they get things done immediately. And
Yeah.
some you can call and leave 10 messages and send emails and they don't respond.
Right, yeah.
It's just who it is.
It's yeah.
Okay, so we're almost done. There's gonna be situations here that we need to just look at. Is there a tenant in the property? If there's a tenant in the property, are we taking the property with or without the tenant? So if there's a tenant in the property, I'm probably gonna add in my offer a term that says property to be delivered vacant without the tenant, or I'll put a clause in like, yeah, seller agrees to deliver property without the tenant. So you might have an investor buyer that is buying the property with the tenant. They want the tenant, right? So this is a tenant occupied property.
Then they have to stop it, or stop it is only for the rental property.
This is just for this is right now we're talking about a house or condo.
Oh, they have to use the copy of the lease.
So there's a box here. If I check it, if there's a tenant, I check this box. It says it should be checked whether current tenant will remain or not.
Oh.
So then I can deal with that for you.
Family members are considered tenants.
If they have a lease.
Well, without a lease.
Without a lease, I don't know.
I was told this
a verbal lease
today that if they've lived in the house like the whole time, their whole life.
I've never heard that, but
yeah,
you might be right. I don't know.
They're considered tenants.
Wow. Yeah, I guess. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So leases in real estate can be verbal if less than 1 year. If it's more than 1 year, they cannot be verbal. It has to be in writing.
Right.
That's all I know.
Yeah, but yeah, tenants. I was speaking to.
But can they say that they've been a tenant there? Yeah, I guess if they don't own the property and they're allowed to stay there, maybe that's enough to classify them as tenant.
Yeah, their dad let them live there. Yeah. You know, no rent, but you know they're considered tenants, so they have to be out as well. That's what I have to deal with. I have to get them out of the house.
If someone passes away without a will and without the property being in a trust, then there might be probate involved.
Yeah.
So if the property is not in a trust, usually there will be a probate. There might be some ways to get around this if it's a spouse passing away.
But do you fill it out anyway?
If the property is in probate, you'll want to click this box.
If not, you don't have to.
If not, you don't have to worry about it. Manufactured homes, we don't do. That's like our trailer part.
Tenancy in common.
Tenant in common. So sometimes you'll have a property where the sellers are tenants in common. They're not joint tenants. They're not community property. It's not husband and wife. These are two people that are partners. They own a property together as tenants in common. Tenants in common can have different ownership interests. They don't have to be even.
But husband and wife are tenant in common, no?
Husband and wife is usually joint tenant.
For community
property.
This is tenant.
However, that couple should transfer the property into a trust.
Yeah.
To avoid probate.
Yeah.
So joint tenancy has the right of survivorship. Mm-hmm. So one of the spouses passed away.
Right.
In California, it's always the husband first.
Right.
When one spouse passes away, there is a right of survivorship. So ownership will go to the spouse.
Right.
However, there are documents that need to be filed. So we have to make sure that those documents get filed. So let's see, other addenda. If we're adding addendum number 1, because we have a whole bunch of extra stuff we want to add, we're going to check the box and add addendum 1. We'll go to the forms, we'll add addendum 1. Now, this is a common one, backup offer. Let's say there were 30 offers on a property and we want to get our offer submitted for backup. We're going to have to check this box, backup offer addendum.
Oh.
And then on the backup offer addendum, we're going to say that we want to be in position number 1. That means if we can get the seller to accept that, that means that if the first deal falls apart, we are automatically the new buyer. They can't sell the property to anyone else.
Oh, they cannot sell it. Oh.
If they assigned our backup offer addendum. So if we want to be backup, I always recommend to my buyer, if they don't get it, to ask if we can be backup offer number 1.
But
we want
seller,
to position.
seller can disagree, say I don't want the backup.
Seller can say I don't want.
Say no, I don't want.
But my conversation with the listing agent is, you should accept our backup offer because it may strengthen your offer that you have now. Because you can tell your current buyer you have a backup offer.
Oh,
It's a very strong, it's a strong position.
I have
someone waiting. If you don't want it, I have someone waiting.
Can you see the offer? I mean, can the seller show you the offer?
Yes, because offers are not confidential.
Oh, they can say.
They can, whether they do or not, that's a different story.
They-
They probably won't,
Or they can say
but
that.
they can't. It's not confidential.
Right, okay.
If the property has a well or septic tank,
I'm sorry, what, when the other buyers ask me, like, if I'm a listing agent, what are other offers?
you're allowed to tell them.
I'm allowed, but if I don't want to say.
If you don't want to say it, don't say it. You say it.
You can't say the exact price.
I'm not sharing that information. I have strong offers.
Right.
And make your best offer.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll present it to the seller.
You can give a hint that in the high, I have offer in 5.
Yeah, they're very strong.
Five,
Very
right?
strong. You can do whatever you want.
You can do whatever.
That's your negotiation strategy.
Negotiate, but you cannot give exact price on that.
You can do whatever you want.
Right.
That's negotiation. Whatever you think the best
Right.
in your scenario. Every scenario is different. You're going to have times where you want to share, and you're going to have other times where you don't
Yeah,
want
you
to
say
share.
that. Right.
Every time, everything is different.
In order to jack up the prices on this, which is only competition.
Short sales we haven't seen in many years, but this is when a home seller owes more on the property than it's worth. And then you're going to be asking the bank to forgive the debt of the person.
But you will have a tax problem with that.
I mean, if the property is a short sale, you'll just have to add this addendum. That's all. That's all.
Right,
Like, they obviously people need to check with their accountants what they're doing. But that's the place to check. If it is a short sale, you check this box.
You got to be a specialist in this one.
If the property was probate, remember we were talking about the probate.
Yeah.
If court confirmation is required, you're going to check this box.
What does it mean?
So when someone dies without their property being in a trust, if there's no will and trust, then who gets the money? So because the will and trust took care of that, it said who gets the money. But if there's no document to say who gets it now the government might get involved and say, are there children?
Right.
They want to protect the family. Like,
Right.
are there children involved? So
family
they need to
member.
find out what's going on. So there's going to be a probate process where a judge looks at the asset. They want to notify all the next of kin. They need to find out who are the relatives.
Yeah.
Everyone gets notified. And then a listing agent will list the property once there's an administrator that's assigned to the case. And then the property will get an accepted offer. And then even after the accepted offer, the listing agent and the buyer will go to court and the judge will look at the offer and say, is there anyone here at court that wants to bid on this property? I have an offer here. The next starting bid is say 10% more than this. Does anyone want to buy in the property for that? And there could be a bidding war in court. That day.
Yeah.
That's court confirmation.
And
or nobody shows up. The judge says, is anyone here to bid on this property? No one stands up. Okay, I approve.
But the relatives should show up and bid that, not everyone.
The relatives are going to get paid. They're going to get paid.
Yeah.
Right now, we're just talking about selling the property. Who's buying the property?
The conservative shift.
If the relatives want to keep the property, then there's no listing.
No, I mean, you say they can bid that. I mean, who can come and
Anybody can come in court and just bid.
although you had an accepted offer.
They can overbid. Yeah, it's called overbid.
But sometimes it's a sometimes it's a probate sale, but it's written no.
No court confirmation
Yeah, what is
required.
that?
Yes. That means that it's being treated as a standard sale. The property is in probate, which means that there's an attorney that is, so basically what probate is, it's removing assets out of that person's name. When there's property that's in, say, my name, and I pass away, that property can't remain in my name, a lot of it. So if there was no trust and will, how to handle that, and then because if there was a trust and will, that can be recorded and it can be moved out of my name. If there is none of that, there has to be a court process to get it out of my name. That's called probate.
So when it says no confirmation.
When it says no court confirmation required, that means that there was probably a will. And it's very clear how the money was left to who, but it wasn't in a trust. And because it wasn't in a trust, someone needs to read the will. The court needs to still read the will and execute the will, but there's not going to be a ceremony in the court to ask if there's bidders.
Okay. If it's a trust, it's a trust sale.
If it's a trust,
it's not a probate sale.
Yeah.
So a trust sale though can be a husband and wife selling a property that's in trust. Like they can have their property in trust and not be dead and sell the property. It's still considered a trust.
But probate means someone definitely
probate, someone passed away. Without a trust. Without the property being in trust. Yeah. And probate is the process of getting their name off of the property. It has to be. And people, the administrator, so you either have an administrator who's assigned by the court, which could be a family member, or a court assigned person, or it's an attorney, a trust attorney who's assigned. They get paid after the entire estate is final. They don't get paid until then. And it's a set percentage, it's a government set percentage. They want that house sold at ASAP because they want to get paid. Can it be the?
What if it's a husband and, I'm sorry, husband and wife own the property?
Yeah.
The man dies and the woman has got dementia and is not capable of things.
So usually in a trust, usually a good estate attorney in the trust says who are the trustees.
But they have to be a trust.
And then who are the surviving trustees. So you should have successor trustees. That it'll say in case of this person, case of this person's incapacity, these are the successor trustees.
But they don't have a trust. They don't have a trust, nothing, and the man dies and the woman has got dementia or something is incapable of.
And then are there children?
No children.
No children. Then the property might go back to the state.
Oh, you go to the state.
The state will get
the state will take it over because
take it. Yeah, the state will take it.
Or you get someone from the court to handle that person.
The money goes to the state.
You go to the
state.
The money no children. How about relative? That be.
If there's a relative, they are entitled to it.
They're entitled.
Yeah. If there is a relative, they can prove they're a relative.
They go to the court and
they'll get
it. Can the agent be the executor?
The agent. Can the agent be the executor?
Agent?
I guess you could, but you'd have to apply to be it, and you have to tell the judge why you're being it.
Right.
But you need to have experience as a fiduciary. You need to be a fiduciary. I'm not sure. I don't know. We might have a prevention in our E&O insurance that doesn't allow us. There might be a law against it. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
And then on the
second, can give legal advice.
An attorney. An attorney for sure.
Yeah.
A private party can for sure. Can a real estate agent be? I don't know. I don't know.
Not without the seller. Like I don't think.
No, but there's no seller.
They're not getting anything out of it, but they're commissioned when they sell the property.
You can become a fiduciary,
right?
But I don't know. I don't know. The answer is I don't.
And then on the sale of probate, was it 90% is the opening bid?
Oh yeah, I used to know those numbers off.
I think it was 90.
I haven't dealt with it in a little while.
I think it's 90%.
So the will does not have the value if
the will says I'm leaving my property to so and so.
A lot of people don't
if
have
there is no trust.
No, but you can have a will with no trust.
Oh.
You can have a will document that just says I'm leaving my property to so and so in case I die.
The will doesn't replace
There
it.
is a will.
The will does not replace the trust. A will is just saying who they're leaving their stuff to.
Yeah.
A trust is a completely separate entity. A trust never dies. A trust is an entity. So a person can die, a trust can't die. It's a forever entity.
So the will is not as strong as the trust.
Well, when you own a property, you can transfer the ownership of that property to the trust, and then you're the trustee. So you can decide what happens to the property on behalf of the trust. But the trust now owns the property. So because the trust owns the property, there's already paperwork in there to do in case one of the trustees passes away.
Or LLC, right?
LLC. If the property is in an LLC, I don't know, we're getting technical. I know that if the property is not in a trust, there will be a probate. How's that?
Yeah.
Right.
I have a question.
Yep.
You've already
I think we ran out of time.
I know, thank you.
Sorry. No,
When I come to your office, no
okay,
problem.
real quick, 1 second. I just want to go through the rest because there's really nothing left.
No,
in
this is the same paragraph.
Okay.
Let him go
1 second.
through
I'm just running through this. We will have to have a part 2, but
Yeah.
it's really just to go through
Yeah.
the extra verbiage in here and stuff. But as far as filling out the contract, we got through that part. So I'm gonna have to have a part 2, which we will, to get through the terms of the contract. But the part that gets filled in, we got through.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
So much.
Okay.
JJ, what's the phone number, please?
310
310.
980 5999.
Are you taking Q&A sessions at this point?
At this point, I am.
We're more concerned about food.
Stomach right now. Wait,
Can you save an unfinished?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, right.
Thank you, John.
If you're going for backup offer, yes. So because I.
Save it down.
You don't need to do that.
Save it down.
Just check the.
Your progress is saved automatically.
Oh, okay.
That's the box.
Guy. Guy.
Again, backup offer number 1.
Yeah, I got a doozy, man. 4 brothers. He has sense. He doesn't live in the house. The other 3 brothers.
Backup offer.
And one doesn't.
Attaches when you put them up.
The other 2 don't make it. And
Here's the backup offer. No,
they think they're gonna stay in the house.
They affordably just entered into the purchase agreement.
Like 100,000 to get
Dated today. Between buyer and seller.
and
Sounds like they need to step up and start making some real money.
So here you
yeah.
number 1.
They're down there 60 years old.
And then you need to say how much time you're asking.
No, it's a doozy.
Because this expires.
It's my first one.
How long is the seller on the hook for you to be buyer at backup offer number 1? You want as long as you can get on.
They think they're gonna stay. Okay, so the parking.
Yes.
Okay,
Says they can keep.
there's another parking lot,
Just like it's to expire. So you want to get as much time as you can. Your foot.
on the right-hand side, right next to Rolex.
Okay. Can we go find out?
Same kind of parking lot, same ticket, first 2 hours free.
Yeah.
So if you want to do the hour and 50 minutes here, then go there. You could do another hour and 50 minutes. If you go over, you probably end up paying $3.
No, where do they get published? They get published in.
Yeah.
So
I was here for
What do you mean?
4.5 hours yesterday.
because it has to be published in. There's criteria for where it gets published. Then it can be published in any newspaper. It can be published in the Beverly Hills
Dude, it's just ridiculous.
in the Valley Pink Sheet. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be published in one specific place.
Okay,
So
for someone like me,
Already passed.
if I want to find out, where do I go?
that's a good question. It's a good question. So like
$9, 12 now,
let's look on Google.
18 by the time I get downstairs.
And you probably will have to subscribe to this. So I know you can do it in the MLS. Well, it's a little harder. In the MLS, you can search for
That would be the best, I guess.
well, Google. So here,
Just like.
I'll show you.
Properties.
So how do I know list of current properties?
Sure.
In Los Angeles County. Let's just see what comes up here. Probate list. HUD foreclosed homes, probate sale, upcoming auctions. What is this? Big KW. I don't know what that is. Big KW.
So that's the same as auction.
Here we go. Here we go. County of Los Angeles. It's good. Tax. This is tax defaulted properties. Auction and surplus by probate. Sanborn team. This is an agent that gets probate listings.
Oh.
She's a very active agent now. She specializes.
Wow.
Probate listing specialist.
So there is an agent involved? Even if
No. You're just asking for a court. You just want to know, hey Paul, you just want to know what's going to appear in court. So let's see.
So you go to court.
Court, probate, property.
And combine?
Probate division. Yeah, I'm going to New York tomorrow morning for a wedding.
Okay.
So
You're going to
crazy
New
thing.
York. I just moved from New
Oh,
York.
nice.
I did that 48 years.
Wow. In the city?
In Nassau and
Okay.
then Queens.
Oh, nice.
Oh
My wife is from Plainview.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So
I was with
I don't-
Laffey Real Estate.
okay. So you might be able to subscribe directly from LA County. So I know that it happens in the Stanley Mosque Courthouse. That's who handles it.
Stanley Court.
Stanley Mosque. The Stanley Mosque Courthouse is where the probate division is.
Santa Monica? Or is that downtown?
That's downtown.
Downtown. Uh-huh.
So here. So look, here's the case calendar. Probate case calendar right here. I agree. Search by case number, search by location. Courthouse, Stanley Moss Courthouse. For today.
How long
Hi,
after?
JJ. Hi, Suki. I'm just finishing up my class. I went way over time. Can you give me just a few minutes? Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Hey, JJ, is this class, if I want to print this purchase agreement, is it in here?
It is in my shared folder under contracts.
Yeah, I just looked on the contract.
There we go. Look, department. So court again, Beverly Hills probate. Well, let's see what's there. Beverly Hills probate. What's going on? Let's see.
Let's share it.
So it says there's no calendar for Beverly Hills probate. Okay, let's see what else. Probate departmental letter. Okay. Status report hearing, trust hearing. You would need to click on all of these and see what the status is. So I don't know what it's called for the day that petition hearing. I'm not sure.
I have a question about this. If there is no trustee, if it's not in the trust, that means they don't know who's the owner?
No, they know who the owner is. The owner passed away.
Yeah, but
Probate is the process of getting property out of someone's name. Now,
how about the families?
So it goes to court when the property is getting sold. So
if any of the families, they don't want it, so
right,
so it sells. So
the reason
all the
that
families are gonna be there.
the reason that the property is selling is because you probably have more than one inheritor.
Oh.
So if there are two people that are getting the money, three people, four people getting the money, it needs to get split. The only way it can get split is the property sold. It's not, right? Because if there's only one person, they just get the property, right? But it's usually a bunch of kids that all need to get equal shares of the money, right?
Oh.
That's why it's getting sold. Plus, there's gonna be some taxes. They might have to pay for debts of the person that passed away too, right? The debtors, the debts need to be paid.
They're gonna need
They have to sell property.
They're not gonna be able to purchase the money, purchase the house unless they have 90% of cash.
Oh, so the families, this is the situation, the families want to sell it.
The family wants to sell it to split up the money.
Yeah.
And they can't sell it because it wasn't in a trust. Or if there was a will, but then it might not require court confirmation, right? Because there was a will, so there's no court confirmation required because it was already spelled out who gets what. But if there was no will, now the court comes in and says we need to protect the kids. We want to make sure that this gets handled fairly.
So the family.
We want to make, but the court's going to make sure that everyone's getting their fair share.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's what's supposed to happen.
The executor.
It was a great class.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The executor does that. As a trustee, is the one who splits it up, and they get paid a fee. Well, so my question I have to find out is, can an agent be a trustee? If you're doing it as
Legal hotline.
Bye, everybody.
If you're doing it as a capacity of a